Well, I had hoped to avoid this controversy, because frankly I find it quite stupid, but we're going into, it seems like a full week here of Trump and the Democrats fighting over, who loves Israel more. And of course this all started back, I don't know, was it a couple weeks ago? Was it a few days ago? I really don't care to look. But Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, who are a couple of Islamic congresswomen who are quite critical of Israel. One of them, Tlaib, I believe, is from the West Bank. And I guess they wanted, like many U.S. congressmen do, to go over to Israel. Of course, when your average U.S. congressman goes over to Israel, oftentimes the trip is actually paid for by the Israeli government or by Israeli interest groups. But they also happen to be, in exchange, they say some pretty nice things about Israel. They show them around, they show them, oh, look how big our wall is, and, Republican congressmen love to take pictures in front of the Israeli wall and say, like, oh, look at this big, beautiful wall. And it's a lot of fun and games, and then they go home, and it's like a little safari out in the desert. And it's not just Republicans. You also have plenty of Democrats, folks like, your average Democrats like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. They're very favorable towards Israel. They understand that they're the greatest ally and that they can do no wrong, and they go over there and say very nice things, and then they go home. But Omar and Tlaib, it was very clear, we're going to go over to Israel and say not so nice things. Not so nice, in fact, that it would be, pretty unprecedented in the history of Israel for any American congressman or congresswoman, women in this case, to go over to Israel and say really anything that's mean. I can't think of an instance of any congresspeople going over to Israel, and treating them like they're anything other than, the greatest country on earth. And so, as the official story goes, when Bibi Cut went to this, he pulled their visas and said, no, you're not coming over here. We're not going to let you come over here and say nasty things about us. If you don't like us, you can stay out. Now, I thought that this was a pretty bad move PR-wise for Bibi, because frankly, it looks like a pretty desperate move. Like, you're so afraid of these two women coming over and saying mean things about your government that you can't even let them in, and they are representatives of your greatest ally. They're not even from a hostile nation. They're from your greatest and number one ally in the world, and you can't take any criticism even from them. So I thought it just made Bibi look really fragile and kind of a snowflake. But somebody who I have a lot of respect for, Dave Smith, who's a comedian, he made a good point and thought that perhaps the Israelis would have let them in because they understood, what I just said, and that it would be a terrible PR move, but that maybe Trump leaned on Bibi to deny them visas because, Trump doesn't like them and kind of wanted to cause trouble for him, and this wouldn't be without precedent because Trump also pulled out one of Nancy Pelosi's trips overseas when he was mad at her over something. There, I have no evidence to support that, but that's something that makes a bit of sense to me that could have happened. Because the only person who I think really has capitalized off of this whole controversy really hasn't been Israel. I don't think Israel's come out looking very good. I think they look kind of, like snowflakes. And Omar and Tlaib don't look particularly good because in addition, after Bibi denied their visas, Tlaib went on TV and cried that she just wanted to go over there to see her dying grandmother. And then, I guess the Israelis approved her visa and said, oh, you want to come see your dying grandmother? Come over. And then, she said she poo-pooed that. So she kind of looks like a jerk, too, because she did that to make a point. And so kind of the cleanest dirty shirt in the hamper in this case seems to be the president. He's the one who's kind of just pointed at all sides and tried to stay somewhat above the fray while also taking a few pot shots and down punching at these two congresswomen. And he's also done quite a bit to try and associate these women and promote their profiles to sort of call, and he's been calling them leaders of the Democratic Party. And they're the fresh faces, they're the future. They are what the Democrats have to look forward to. And he's really sidelined AOC in the last couple weeks, which is kind of interesting. So that brings us to the president's narrative that the Democrats are anti-Semites and that they hate Israel because, of course, that means the same thing. Anti-Semitic, of course, in American political parlance means someone who criticizes Israel, which, of course, makes it very difficult to distinguish between someone who doesn't like Israel and someone who, doesn't like Jewish people. Now, of course, in America, they don't really consider there to be much of a difference there. If you criticize Israel at all, it's only because you hate the Jews. So there can't be any other reason. You couldn't actually criticize the actions of the Israeli government without just having a blanket hatred of Jewish people, apparently. And so that's how Trump came to this conclusion the other day, I think it was yesterday, to where he said, basically, if there's any Jews that are still voting Democrat, then they're either very ill-informed or they're just disloyal. And a lot of people took that to mean, of course, that the leftists decided to jump on that and say, Trump is saying that the Jews are disloyal to America. That's just like what Hitler said. And that's obviously not what Trump is saying. Trump is saying that the Jews, he's saying something I think even worse than that the Jews are disloyal to America. He's saying the Jews that vote Democrat are disloyal to their own group, to other Jews, because they're voting for people who Trump perceives to be against Israel, which is an implicit sort of statement that Jews have to be loyal to Israel, which is a really, really dark and creepy assertion. Of course, it's very much in line with what Bibi Netanyahu believes. Netanyahu calls himself sort of the prime minister of all Jews. But this is not something you want to promote, because that promotes, the actual anti-Semitic, conspiracy that Jews around the world are working in concert together, towards a common interest, that they're all the same, that they're, one big group, that you can't really differentiate individual Jewish people out, and that people who live in America are loyal to America and not Israel. Trump is saying that no, you're in fact you're a bad person if you're not loyal to Israel first. I mean, I don't know how that comes out of your brain without realizing that what you're doing is you're validating the Jewish conspiracy theory. And I'm sure if I have, any anti-Semitic subscribers, they'll be in the comments section right now saying, see, I told you so. The Jews only love Israel. They can't love America. Trump said as much. But obviously that's not the case, because even if what Trump said was true, that Jews who vote for Democrats are disloyal to Israel somehow, well, then that's very much the case. Then there are a lot of Jews who are disloyal to Israel. And that right there disproves the conspiracy theory, which apparently Trump, wanted to be true. That's kind of what it sounds like. And so to top it all off this morning, President Trump tweeted out a very long quotation from Wayne Allen Root that was apparently from some Newsmax TV hit, to where he basically said, Trump, he's the greatest president for the Jews ever. He's the greatest president for Israel ever. He is, he's like the king of Israel. And it was a much longer quote than that, and I won't read the whole thing, but that's the gist of it, that, Trump's great for Israel, which makes he's the greatest president for Jews ever. Well, let me put it, in a way that that just about anybody could understand. If Israel's doing really well and is prospering a lot, and let's say, they're exporting lots of arms to Africa and Asia, and they're selling lots of weapons and whatever else it is that Israel produces. I think they make solar panels too, maybe. But whatever. Israel's exporting lots of stuff. They're making lots of money. They're building, beautiful big houses for everyone. Everyone's really rich. And Israel's doing great. Okay? Let's just say that. How does that help a Jewish deli owner in Queens? It doesn't. He doesn't live in Israel. If Israel's doing really well, that doesn't help Jewish people in America. So if you're the best president for Israel ever, you're not the best president for Jews ever. You're only the best president for Israeli Jews. Meanwhile, you've done absolutely nothing to help American Jews other than saying, hey, look, I helped these other Jews in another country that aren't you. So don't you love me? That means that I like people like you, even though I haven't done a damn thing that has made your life any better relative to, how things were before. And I'm not saying that, Trump's a, terrible guy and that he hasn't done anything that, would make America great or something like that. That's not what I'm discussing here at all. All I'm saying is that, him doing lots of things and being really nice to Israel has done nothing to help American Jews. He hasn't done much to help Moroccan Jews either, or French Jews. So on that note, I think I will call it a day. If you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and subscribing. And if you do subscribe, please do click the bell, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.